Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Cheryl Jansen, Global Marketing Director here at Sophion. The topic of today's webinar centers around a new use case within the Accolade universe, strategic initiative management. It's no secret that the market dynamics are changing quickly. We live in a world where what worked yesterday won't necessarily work tomorrow or next year, and relevancy is a real concern. Successful organizations must work differently if they're going to stay viable today and into the future. So joining us today to talk about how successful organizations are managing their strategic initiatives and why it's important is Erin Moskow. For the past 6 years, Erin has worked with numerous organizations, particularly in healthcare and consumer goods. Here at Sophion, Erin is an innovation management consultant responsible for successful implementation, risk management, and adherence to best practices across Accolade implementations. So, Erin, I'll turn the session over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Before we start talking about how to make strategic initiative management real, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking through the why behind it all. Disruption is now commonplace, as Cheryl alluded to in her intro. It's the new normal. The headlines that you see here are becoming more and more common as new disruptors enter the market. And it's moved beyond the Amazons and the Ubers and the Airbnbs of the world, as well as moving to the top of the senior leadership agenda. So what do these companies that are being disrupted have in common? While some truly didn't see the writing on the wall or missed the big opportunities or the threats from new technology, others had the right strategic vision, but simply moved too slowly, or at least slower than their external markets and their competition. And that brings us to one of the biggest business challenges today. The rate that companies of all sizes are realizing their strategy is too low to be sustainable. Now, historically, only 13% of companies realize their stated and funded strategy. And this is mostly due to a disconnect between the corporate strategy and the day-to-day activities of the company. That used to be okay in the past, particularly for market leaders who are deploying maybe more defensive strategies to maintain their market share. However, today, this has become a going out of business metric in the fast-paced digitalized world. The companies that have digital business models are moving fast, and they have access to billions more in working capital. Now, Daniel Prosser wrote a book referring to these 13ers as being on the right side of the digital divide, those who have it and those that don't. And relevancy is a real concern for corporate leaders today. Several research reports show the declining life cycle of our Fortune 500 companies. And Yale School professor Richard N. Foster suggests that up to 75% of the S&P 500 will no longer be on the list by 2027. More and more, the ability to close this gap between corporate strategic plans and operational execution activities is being seen as the key to sustainable, profitable growth, as well as continued relevance. This realization is causing significant and urgent change. All of this change and disconnect has driven the need for companies to create new digital operating models. Manual and disconnected annual operating planning processes have been replaced with more connected, dynamic processes that strengthens the capacity for continuous improvement across the company. As an example, the AOP of one of our largest customers was traditionally not completed until after the first quarter of the new operating year. All the while, their competition figured out how to streamline their process and was taking market share. Today, that company has reduced their annual AOP timeline from a 9-month process to a 90-day iterative strategic planning cycle. They have had to dramatically increase visibility and harmonization across the enterprise to increase their rate of strategy realization. We just spoke about how unacceptably low this has been for so many organizations. And they have had to organize all their innovation, other investments, and cross-functional work activity into a single source of truth, allowing them to cut through the complexity of process and infrastructure and ultimately improve their speed to market. The underlying challenge that most companies face is that they are operationally disconnected while trying to compete in a connected world. They have these fundamental capabilities that I'm sure are familiar to you: strategic planning and execution activities, and they have a gap between them. They start to fill that gap with people, processes for portfolio management, and cross-functional collaboration and decision-making, and an army of disparate tool sets, commonly accessed databases, Excel PowerPoints, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations. The primary challenge that they're sharing with us is that there is too much friction, delay, and a lack of transparency across these particular capabilities of an organization. And that's preventing them from moving forward with speed.